And thank you very much for bringing your experience in content creation with 3D and immersive environments to our conference this afternoon. So in the panelists that we have this afternoon, we have a number of different types of applications, a number of different types of audiences, all with an important element of context, content and context in what the experience is. So let me ask you, Sandi and Don, in turn to introduce yourselves and tell just a little bit about what you're doing, and especially in terms of content and immersive narratives. Sandi.
Hello everybody, my name is Sandi Winter and I'm currently the director of the Wellness Living Laboratory, which is an initiative of the Stanford Prevention Research Center. And I'm here today actually representing the Healthy Aging Research and Technology Solutions Lab, which is run by Professor Abby King. And the work that we do is trying to promote physical activity, often in older adults and in people who have low literacy levels and low comfort levels with technology. And so the work that we do is trying to think about how we can promote physical activity in this group. And we're particularly interested in this in terms of behavior change, so behavior change theories and behavior change techniques.
Hi, I'm Don Bland. I am a media and visual technologies expert. I'm working on a project right now with Stanford and the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. We are doing a stress inoculation study with children that are going in for heart surgery to see if we can lower cortisol stress levels and have more positive outcomes after surgery. So this is basically taking children and putting them in a lifelike environment, giving them applications and diaphragmatic breathing mindfulness techniques to help them overcome what might be the most stressful situation they're ever going to be in their short lives, or I'm sorry, the beginning of their lives. So anyway, that's what we're working on.
That's great. Jesse.
Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Mala. I'm Chief Design Officer and co-founder of a company called IDEAN. We're a couple of hundred designers, developers, originally from Scandinavia, but nowadays we have 5 different locations here in the US. We've been working with AR, VR, 3D, different kinds of applications since a couple of years back, and not only the obvious ones like entertainment, sports, games, etc., but a lot of B2B applications too.
Thank you, Jess.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Marcelo. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, co-founder of a Brazilian tech company called Sábia Experience, which is a member, has been a member of mediaX since 2013. And we develop a platform for the trained workforce using immersive experiences. We started working with the industrial sector, but now we are spreading to another sectors like service, health, education itself. I'll have some slide, but I think I'll play afterwards, right, Martha?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I wanted everyone to have a chance to introduce themselves first, and then go into a little bit of detail. There are some exhibits that are from various of your organizations, and some of you may see that. So I have seen them already. And so let's start with whichever is up here first. And we have Sábia up first. So Marcelo, would you like to go into a little bit of detail about the content and Sábia Experience and some of the tools that you've developed for creating that?
Okay. The company, we are located in 3 cities in Brazil, right? In São Paulo, Rio, and Florianópolis, we are a member. And now we are moving to another sectors. And here, oops, sorry. Here's the example. You see the workers inside the offshore platforms. We create this device called WeCog. It's a group computer, so people can play, interact. I don't know if I can show you right here. Yeah, let's see here. You see this, the worker is showing the plate with augmented reality marker. so can show the machine, and so they can analyze the situation or the physical and 3D information image of the content, so they can take decisions as a group. So you see here, each worker has its own space where they can take decisions. So in order to the content to move forward, they have to build the consensus and go forward. Okay, let me show you. This is an example we are doing right now. Here is the real picture of one place in Brazil where they have an offshore platform, a lot of constructions. So they take the 3D 360 photo of the environment, they can put in the content, and the workers can explore all these scenarios and play the content. Here is again the worker showing the plate to the computer or a mobile phone or a tablet, and they can decide if the scaffold was okay or not. So they can handle the 3D information in order to take decisions and run the story. Here's another application. We are working with Samsung in Brazil, developing a 3D content and immersive experience to train salespeople how to learn how to sell S7 and Edge. And so it's really a real picture of one of stores. So of course these characters were put in here using the tool so they can interact and run to this content. The idea is to transform specification in stories. So by interacting with these stories and teach the salespeople how to tell stories instead of just talking about specification. And here is the authoring tool. You choose journeys, experiences, so it's so completely gamified. And many examples here of the experience that the client, usually the corporate university are playing with this authoring tool. And here they can, it's a special place where I can put a photo or a 3D image. Here use text-to-speech technology. We are using Watson for the many languages, so you can integrate that. And here you can produce the games, even the answers of the games you can put it. So we have invested many years just to give the idea to simplify the way people can build the content. It's just information if you want to play afterwards, after the panel. This is the address here, sabiabiotics.com. And before that, if you want to play with the augmented reality, go to this sabiabiotics.com/AR and take a photo or print it out so you can show the computer and can play the interactive game.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marcelo. Sandy, do you want to show some things additional to vCoach?
No. Okay. So, should I talk?
Yes.
So I am actually following on from the talk that Vincent gave earlier on about the virtual coaching system. And the partnership that we've had with eTree was to test the vCoach system in a population here in the States. And the things that we were looking at were things that would influence the content development by eTree. So we had enrolled a number of participants. They came into the lab, they went through the vCoach system, and we got both qualitative and quantitative information from them about how they found that experience so that we can use that information to try and change the content. So things that we would ask them were like, would they prefer exercising in front of an avatar, or would they want a real person? And most people said that they wanted a real person and they didn't want an avatar. We also asked them if they were exercising, did they want to see somebody who looked like they did, or were they happy in exercising with somebody who looked different from them? So, you know, it could go both ways. If you're a middle-aged woman and you're doing exercises, it might be really off-putting to see somebody who looks like Claudia Schiffer or something like that. But generally speaking, people didn't have any preferences when it came to age or gender or ethnicity. The only thing that they requested was that they have a real person and not an avatar. And so those are the kinds of feedback that we've been able to provide to ITRI to try and help them as they think about spreading their system out through the US. And I think that it would be different in different cultures, and so you'd have to do these kinds of tests and make them culturally relevant as well as language relevant, obviously.
That's great. In terms of testing the relevance, Don, your Braveheart is still in development, but what are you finding? And can you talk a little bit about your process of content development?
Sure. Would you like me to talk about the slides or just
yeah,
in general?
Yeah, let's do the slides.
Sorry. I don't know if this is going to go in order. Oh, here we go. So I come to you as an adventure cinematographer. So I spent about the first 10 years of my life making shows like The Deadliest Catch, Axemen, Ice Road Truckers, Black Gold, Tornado Road, about 100 other ones. So these are all very much dangerous environments that we would use to bring people to the edge of death. What we found was that storytelling is the ultimate user experience. And we were very fortunate at the time that we were making these shows to be in HD. So we found that HD was a very good first version of what immersive environments were. All of these shows, we would develop different camera systems that would have to handle, the ocean, freezing, falling. There's a lot of vibration on oil rigs. We would shake the crap out of them. Virtual environment or environments that we would freeze cameras. Did optical cameras work better than tape-based cameras? And the answer is yes, because of threading mechanisms and hydrodynamics and lubrication. So we made a lot of these shows for a lot of these different brands like Discovery and History and National Geographic. And has anybody ever heard of the network on the bottom? So that was a network we started in 2010 called 3Net. And 3Net was the first fully programmed 3D stereoscopic television network. And the reason you never heard about it is because 3D turned out to be terrible on a TV. We spent about $70 million proving that. I guess the parable here is that we could take all of these same shows and shoot them stereoscopically and put them on a TV, and no one wanted to watch them because, one, 3D is kind of terrible on a TV, and I'll be the first to admit that after making hundreds of hours of it. But the other part is that just because you bring technology to storytelling doesn't make it better. And we were fumbling and failing all over the place. And we were finding that things that were really good in HD, if we took 2 HD cameras and put them together, was twice as bad. It cost twice as much, and it was half as entertaining. So, is it that way? That brings us to other virtual environments. And so with HD or with 3D, it was always a passive experience. And just because we could bring someone what seemingly would be closer to the action by giving them something in stereoscopic vision was actually not as fun because they couldn't interact with the environment. And VR has been so instrumental in helping people be immersed, but then you get the world of engagement as well. With our Braveheart project, we're not doing any inputs besides gaze. So what we're trying to do is everywhere that the viewer looks has a different level of engagement by making something come alive. As you can see in the center here, we have a kiosk that's in every scene that has a real character that's gone through this particular procedure. And they act as a guide that brings the kids through it to help, one, show that there's positive outcomes beyond the surgery, and two, act as a buddy, because kids love peers and kids listen to peers, and everybody wants to be friends with the cool kid. So we are basing it off of a, if you can see over here on the left, it's based off of a mobile 3D or VR platform. So what it is something that kids take home, and it's a prescription-based software. So they have certain times that they watch the video, and then they take cortisol tests afterwards. And then this helps prove in our study, it's a IRB study, that what we're doing is either helping or not. And then the third screen over, as you can see, is we've embedded certain relaxation apps into it. And so these apps help kids to relax and then create coping mechanisms. So the study's several tiers. One is systematic desensitization to stressful environments, and two is teaching them coping skills once they get into those environments. So as you can see over to the left, this is a little bit of the UX that's built into the study. So when someone looks at a certain thing, we're registering gaze, time, and environments, how many times they do it, and based on those metrics, we can then test cortisol levels to see what's working and what's not. We're using Hollywood quality virtual environments with bespoke rigs that we've built, and we're using these green screen environments and then composing everybody into the virtual environment so that when you look at the screen, sort of like in Harry Potter, when you see something on the wall, the screen comes alive and it talks to you as a person and engages you on a very human level. This is in the center bottom. You can see me taking our actress through VR the first time, and it's one of my favorite things in the world to do, is to show someone the power of what a good VR experience is for the very first time. And on the bottom, you can see part of the team here, which is, I guess from the right would be Dr. Lauren Schneider, and then Dr. Ann Dubin, and then our cinematographer, Josh Fritz, myself, Don Bland, and my partner, Walter Greenleaf, who works with the Virtual Humans Lab. So essentially, it's a feel-good project to make kids feel a little bit better about a life-changing surgery. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good step through your process of content creation, and we'll come back with some questions in a minute. Next, I want to give Jess an opportunity to talk about some of the content that you're creating. And
yes. So I don't have any slides, but maybe. So basically, of course, we have a huge differentiation in our applications because we are creating some stuff and stories for mining drill companies who try to educate their employees. And then the other end of the story is, of course, that kind of games. But there's something that I love in this multi-dimensional context design, that it actually forces you to use design thinking principles, because there is so many disciplines included in the process. So you have to collaborate. You have to prototype different kind of things no matter what you do. And luckily, we don't have any kind of one prototyping tool available, so we have to be creative. We have to kind of work together with these different kind of disciplines. And last but not least, I would say that if you start using the kind of information that you can get from the end user perspective and include those end users in the design process, you will get some answers answered before you have to do those errors. So that's very, very important, and I think that's why I am so excited about this kind of a VR, AR, 3D, whatever storytelling you are discussing about.
Awesome. So there's some very good experience sitting in front of you with us today. And I think tapping into that is our opportunity in the next couple of minutes. Jess, I want to stay with you for a minute and ask you to talk about some of the elements that, you have thought deeply about some of the critical elements of creating good content in an immersive environment. And would you share those perspectives with us?
Yes, as I said, it's great because, we are basically creating the new frameworks, new methods, new tools in order to do that. But maybe some learnings I can share with you is that because we don't have any kind of platforms that everybody uses, or some already known metaphors that people are using. It's a kind of a wild west from the design and content creation perspective. How to do that and those kind of things in practice. There's a lot of opportunities available, no matter what technologies you are using. And it's only basically, the sky is only the limit, and you can do whatever you want, of course, in the scale of budget and time, as always. But that's something that we learned, that it's actually very, very important that you find meaning and purpose why you are using 3D, VR, or AR, and it has to be in a kind of in some kind of meaning or purpose that makes sense for people. It's not only for fun or something like that. It have to be smooth transition in the process, and in you having those steps in order to basically attract the audiences. So that's basically, I know that it's heavily dependent on the case also, but I would say that if you kind of basically following those principles I mentioned, so include the end users, prototype, and maybe do some kind of testing, it's definitely, it will be there. And as I said, if you can collaborate and be very, very kind of team work oriented, I think that's the way.
How many, can you talk about the number of iterations? I mean,
yeah.
We're here at Stanford, we understand the design thinking, user-centered perspectives, and depending on the domain, you might expect a different number of iterations. What are you finding?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good question. So if you are working, let's say, the mining drill case that we had, it's of course crucial that you get everything right, because people can get easily killed if you're not. So then the iteration rounds, there will be a huge amount of iteration rounds. And with that particular case, we actually tested after every week. So we work in very agile manners. So we have a kind of 1 week sprints, and after every sprint, we actually validate the design and of course the implementation part of it. And we run that kind of cycle almost 6 months. So basically there's quite many iteration rounds. Then if we go the other end of the story, let's say games, it's usually that, okay, let's go out with this one and let's test that alive and see how it goes. Mm-hmm. So there's huge differences between those different applications.
Mm-hmm. So as you're storyboarding, are you storyboarding with the idea in mind that you have to have fairly fine fragments so that you can do the iteration, or does that come after?
Once again, pretty heavily case dependent, but actually storyboarding is one of the probably the best tools to do that. Uh-huh. So combining the kind of technology knowledge that the team has, and maybe the creative power that your team has. The storyboarding is something that we actually learned that's something that Hollywood production has used since 1920s or something like that. And interaction designers been using that maybe from 50s. And if you combine those two, it's actually when the magic starts to happen.
Interesting. Don, you were talking about taking an actress through a scene, a virtual scene, for the first time. Is there a difference in the way that you direct actors and actresses in a virtual production, in a production that's intended for VR?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So VR is a POV-based medium, and
that means
point of view based.
Point of view.
So when someone is talking to you in VR, they're usually addressing you as a viewer, whereas there's very few times in other media that you do that. Whether you're, I guess the other handful of times would be 60 Minutes, the nightly news, something to where you're addressing a single audience member. Almost every other show, if you ever look at it, someone's looking slightly off camera, because people in a passive viewing situation start to feel uncomfortable if someone's staring at them. But in VR, it feels very natural. So that's one of the implementations of storytelling that I would give somebody if they were, going to be in a VR experience, is you're talking to that person because you are engaging on a very personal level with them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. You want to add to that, Jess?
Totally agree. So there is so many different kind of design problems that we have to solve before kind of having the most optimal experiences in VR. So that's one of the kind of biggest ones, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you kind of just observing something, or you part of the action in the middle of something, et cetera, et cetera? There's a lot of different kind of questions around that.
I think this idea of paying attention to the audience and involving them in the process is one that I'd like to explore a little bit. And Sandi and Marcelo, I'm wondering if you can comment on how in what you're doing you bring in the relevance, you identify what's relevance to the audience and bring it into the content creation process.
So I think for the work that we're doing with the V-Coach, that work was initially developed for patients who had had knee surgery or who had cardiac events. And so they were prescribed an exercise regimen by their physicians. And so I think that it has great relevance to them in that acute crisis moment because they feel like they want to make a difference to their health. I think the problem with anything that's to do with trying to make people change their behavior is that typically we know what we ought to be doing, but we don't do it. And so how you can make the V-Coach system relevant enough that once they feel a little bit better, they still want to be engaged in being physically active and in taking the feedback that the system gives them about their technique and their heart rate and all of the different biofeedback, how you can continue to make that appealing to them in the long term, I think is one of the challenges that we face with that kind of exercise coaching.
Marcelo?
Yeah, in our case it's the same. The platform is more suitable if the company wants to change culture and behavior, and usually the company and all the employees and sometimes the corporate university, they really know where the main problems are, and so it's a matter of creating. The platform is addressing this case-based immersive learning. So basically they have their stories, the real cases, or the good examples or the bad examples, and the tool will provide this the opportunity to the company to create stories, real stories, authentic stories from it. So usually it's already it's very important to them because they are already facing these issues. But the trick we had to learn that at the beginning, 4 years ago, we started experiencing lasting 1 hour. It doesn't fit. And I mean, it is impossible in terms of productivity. They just give 15 minutes. They want to tell little stories in 15 minutes, 10 minutes. So we created this platform of creating little pills of tales, little stories. So they can use their own stories, they can use their own cases to explore and build this immersive learning experience to them. And it's very tricky because even the simple word or a simple picture of avatar, if you take the picture of the place, should be really authentic. Otherwise, the workers neglect the experience.
Can I pile on?
Great. Yes, and then I'm going to come out for a question.
So I think that there's a lot of room for growth, especially in this sort of input. There are gamified clinical protocols that you can give people in virtual environments that using 3D tracking hand controllers like from 6 Sense or from HTC or from Oculus, to where they can do, basically physical therapy outside of the clinic, or they can do exercising outside of a gym. Where basically you give a set of protocols, you make it into a game, and people are much more engaged to do so. We saw this with stroke recovery patients, and they didn't want to look at themselves as they didn't want to look at a camera. They wanted a motion-based tracking system instead of an optical-based.
Cool. Is there a question from the audience that you'd like to put in front of the panel? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question that hasn't been brought up today, probably for obvious reasons, but I think it plays an important part in virtual reality, and that is with early adoption of technology. has oftentimes traditionally been driven by porn. We saw that with the adoption of the VCR, we saw that with the high-speed internet, and obviously a lot of the money-making aspects of it. I just wondered if anyone wanted to talk about how and why they see that as an effect in terms of content, pluses and minuses for that in virtual reality.
This is an invitation to talk about.
I'll
Porn in
engage
public.
that question.
I follow you, right?
So I don't think that porn will be a driver for VR. I think that presence plays such a big role in what VR is that I don't think that you get the immersion and the sort of presence of being in a sexual situation when you watch porn in VR. I think with traditional methods of shooting this, it was always third-person viewing, and it was very voyeuristic, and it was taboo, and I think that that's why people went to their homes or they went to theaters to watch it. I don't think that it's a driver for VR in a substantial way. I don't think it's going to create mass adoption.
Totally agree. However, it's already quite big business, and, so I don't really get it. So just for a note, we don't do anything that. Hey, of course, right? But I
Just
guess
talking about what we've heard
in general,
about.
yes,
right?
of course.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess it will be a factor, but not as big factor it has been if we talk about, let's say, internet or something like that.
If history repeats itself, I think that sports also has played big in the
Right.
in the market.
I think that what you just said is right, and that comes directly from the experience perspective. But then there's the other side of things, like a kind of financial side of things.
Yep.
So, and because it's socially questionable to kind of complain or ask your money back guarantee in porn. So the kind of lower quality will be okay.
A lot of times
There's
when
one more question back here.
My question is, in your experience, what kind of content is really good for VR? Jeremy had some things, but I'd love to hear what you say.
I'll go again. So that's a really broad question, but I think when people come to a new technology, the first thing they want to do is just experience it. Like, usually the best VR experiences are ones that someone can adapt to and get about 35 to 40 seconds to just experience. They look around, they see that nothing's going to hurt them, and then they want to take a step further. And that's what's really great about the VR systems out right now, is that what I'll call the 3D multi-touch, right? It's this ability to touch your environment and move around in it in a very natural way is what really draws people in and people really gravitate towards. Like the tilt brush has been widely popular. And all it is the paintbrush app that we all had on our 486 computers in VR. But people love it. When they draw a line and then they can step and look all around it and change their perspective and viewing angle, it's really powerful. I think that, you know, any app that allows people to have a buffer zone to understand what it is and then draws them one step further into immersion or experience or storytelling is moving along the right path.
Can I say something? Marcelo, and then
Karina,
Sandy.
that's a good question. We have been thinking about it, and one of the main challenge in some contents, that the contents involve a group of people discussing the same thing. So how to be in the same environment and take decision. I've watched the presentation of Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. Have you watched this VR group, the first experiment? Have you? It's in the internet, in YouTube. So that was the first trial to put 3 people together in avatars and experience the same thing and take decisions in this 3D environment. I'm a little bit skeptical because people want to discuss, maybe in groups far away from each other would be interesting But content where a group of people can discuss, I think it's still a matter of research, but I see the potential. Having people from different places and countries in the same environment discussing the same thing using avatars and interactivity. It's very powerful, but it will take some time.
So one of the other technologies that I work a lot with is something a bit like photo voice, if anybody knows what that is. It's basically allowing people to take photographs and record audio narratives about features of their environment that they think impact their health. So right now it's a very tablet-based app. They go around, they take a picture, and they say, I took this picture of graffiti because when I walk past this, it makes me feel uncomfortable, or I took this picture of this bridge because it's dark at night, and whenever I walk here, I feel unsafe. And so one of the dreams that we would have is that once you have a group, and it's typically, again, older adults with low technology capabilities and low literacy levels, and that's why they're talking about their experiences and not writing it. One of our ideas is that if you got a group of people together, to put them into a virtual reality environment that replicates what their environment looks now, and then maybe put in some of the solutions that they brainstorm together as a group. So, for example, replacing the graffiti with murals that some of the children from the local school have done or something like that, but actually letting them see and see how that environment would look with the changes that they propose, and being able to present that to policymakers then could potentially be useful at driving neighborhood environmental change to the built environment. And the thing about changing built environments is that if you make a neighborhood safer for walking or more accessible for food, that benefits not only the people the older adults who might have been engaged in that project, but it also benefits everybody within the community. So being able to take those photographs and audio narratives and put that into a virtual environment to be shared with others, I think could be motivational for neighborhood change.
Motivational. There's a question back here.
Question is, do you prefer, like, what is the preferred, for users, what is the preferred type of content in VR? Is it animated content or is it real content? So I'm creating an education-based app, and I'm thinking, should everything, like I can use a 360 camera and record, let's say, this room and put it as a scene, and with real people and real, everything is real. It's a video, or it could be interactive, or should it be animated in 3D design? That's one question. The other one I think nobody's talking about is when this becomes mainstream, we're going to have ads on our face, and is there any policy or any kind of best practices, and how should the ads be, or anybody's talking about that?
Good. Two questions. So animation versus real representation, and what's ad going to be, advertising?
Yeah,
Marcelo?
If you remember, I showed some example about the oil and gas case. We use both. I mean, the real picture, so the workers can realize that they are dealing with the information case-based, at the same time dealing with 3D or dealing with a virtual, so you can extrapolate, you can show the limit, expand the limit of the experience. So in our view, starting with a real place, a real picture is better, so people can feel safe, and then you can take another step forward, showing virtual reality. So you can show maybe a 3D model to improve the experience in this real environment. So we use both cases.
And when we asked our users on the V-Coach system, they all said that they would prefer real people to avatars.
Mm-hmm. You have to think about what the story is that you want to tell. You know, everything has a different paintbrush. And so there's not one environment that's more powerful than another. There's just one environment that fits your narrative better than the other. Mm-hmm. And that's, that gets back to storyboarding or user experience or whatever that is what is the story you're trying to tell? What is going to make the largest impact, and what's the point you're trying to get across? And then if you can answer those three questions, that the difference between a virtual environment or a 360 video will probably, be answered.
It might also be age specific. Different age groups may prefer different things.
Now we have a very special situation here because we have both people who are interested in the technology and people who are interested in the content and people who are interested in the human experience and the human science behind it. And I can't close, but I know I need to close, without asking you as representing the content developers, if you're asking the people who are developing the technology to do two things to make content development go better, what would those two things be? Because they're probably sitting here in the audience, and you can ask them, what would you ask of the content developers? Very quickly, Sandi.
Well, I think because most of the work that I do is with people who typically don't use technology a lot. They are these low income, low literacy, low technology naive individuals. To me, the most important thing is to make the entire system, so not just the content, but the technology use, very, very simple. And I think that simple to design is often more difficult than to make something with a whole lot of bells and whistles, really keeping the message clear and simple. And then I think the other thing is thinking about the ubiquity of all of the technologies that we have. So in my field is a little bit different. Thinking about wearable technologies, you still have to charge it and you have to sync it and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's not really necessarily content driven, but I think wearing your technology, so actually wearing your t-shirt that measures your heart rate and tells you where you're going, or wearing your Google type of glasses that tell you all sorts of information. So I think that there's a lot of future and exciting things out there.
Good, thank you.
So I'm going to total agreement with you. I think that when you can create an experience that makes technology invisible to the user,
That's it.
you are going to be very successful. And most of the problems with emerging technologies is that they're clumsy and they require a lot of thought. And for most people, they just don't have that bandwidth and they're turned off. So if you can create experiences that utilizes the function of the technology and make it easy for everyone to use, you'll lift all boats of VR. I mean, it's something that everybody's hoping that the next developer will do.
Super.
Totally following you guys, but maybe coming from a little bit different angle. In order to do that, we definitely need some more easier tools to prototype and test your ideas, because right now you basically need to be at least aware of some of the code or development principles in order to create something tangible. And if that's something that we can create, then every designer or every human being can start kind of prototyping different kind of things and test the ideas, then we are pretty close to achieve something.
Code-free content development. Marcelo, what would be your two requests?
My experience is for the corporate environment, and what is important about the content for this corporate or for the workforce, for companies, and the content should be really authentic, and the immersive experience should be based on good stories. Good stories. You can imagine how many good stories are and not just for the good example, but some bad examples too. There are good stories in the organizations, and if the content creators can be authentic, they know very well from inside that community, they are able to create good experiences. Sometimes even with no technology at all, just create stories, tell stories, and interact with people. Sometimes even you don't need anything, just tell good stories. And many people in corporate organizations, you have this phenomenon of the 5 generations living for the first time in the corporate. So old people with a lot of experience and young people with a lot of experience too can create stories that can tell to everybody. So good, authentic stories I think is the basic.
Well, I think the stories that we've heard today have been wonderful. Thank you for that. It's a fast-moving field, and the stories that are underway, that we hope we can share with you at another time include those that have haptics in them, those that take acoustics to the next step, maybe olfactory, certainly the cognitive sensory activities, and light fields. But for the stories today, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you.